Hello everyone, this is Rexer from the YouTube channel NotQuiteThereGaming, and today I will be bringing you a primer on the various Warframes in the game. This will be a two-part series. In the first part I will be detailing the three starter Warframes, Loki, Excalibur and Mag. And in the second part I will go over all the other Warframes that are currently available in the game in somewhat less detail. Now, the starter Warframes represent a special point of comparison, because after you pick one of them, you will likely come to compare every Warframe that you will own with your experience with your starter Warframe. Because of this, we will be giving these Warframes a bit more time than the others. But neither of these videos will contain large amounts of numerical stats, nor will they contain advanced strategies about these Warframes. These videos are simply meant to give you an impression of playing these Warframes from the perspective of someone who has spent a reasonable amount of time with them. Let's start with Loki. Loki was my pick for starter Warframe. His health and shields are on the low side, his energy is on the high side, and he is currently the fastest Warframe in the game. I have spent a few resources enhancing him, since I've had him for quite a while. Reactor and Former. This polarity is not part of his starter polarity lineup, so please ignore it for purposes of this video. As I've said in my Loki build video, Loki can best be compared to a rogue type character. A little bit about his skills. Firstly, we have Decoy. Decoy acts as you might think from the name. It creates a holographic decoy of Loki that draws enemy attention. This will remain useful for pretty much the entire time that you will be using Loki, and there is no reason not to take it. It's not an especially exciting skill though, and you will see this pattern forming now continue through all of Loki's skills. His next skill is Invisibility. Invisibility, as you might imagine, turns him invisible. This also gives him a bonus to melee damage, which is pretty much the reason why I chose class him as a sort of rogue character. Invisibility will be less useful to begin with, as you are not used to when you should be using it, and you do not have the energy pool or mods to sustain it for long periods of time. Eventually it will be quite useful, but to begin with, try to study it before using it. Either way, it is a great skill and will remain useful throughout your career of using Loki. Next we have Switch Teleport. Switch Teleport switches you with your target, be that your decoy, teammate, or an enemy. If it's an enemy, it will stun them for a little while. It's fun to use with your decoy because you can get in interesting places. You can also use it on teammates to get them out of trouble, but that's quite rare. I don't think it's actually ever happened to me. It's good for trolling if you want that sort of thing, but try not to, kids, okay? It's arguably useless at any point, but it's fun. His last skill, his ultimate, is Radial Disarm. Radial Disarm disarms target in a reasonably good radius around Loki and forces them to take out their melee weapons and start running after him. This is useful against Near and Corpus, but not so useful against Infested. Against Infested, it will deal damage, and that's not going to be that useful to you. It's a situational skill. You can have some fun with it, but it costs a lot of energy, obviously, for being an ultimate. And outside of certain situations where you know you want to be using it, you probably won't be looking at it too much. Now, Loki, we won't be talking too much about general polarities, because as starter Warframes, you won't be having lots of mods to slot into these 6 spaces. But a word has to be said about the aura polarity. And for Loki, the aura polarity is very well suited to his playstyle, to my playstyle with him, and I would say to the playstyle that you should be approaching with him. The tactical polarity is, I could say, home to the 2 most interesting auras that you could be slotting, which are Energy Siphon or Enemy Sense. Energy Siphon, as I've said, the easiest to justify aura. You want to be on the lookout for a good aura polarity, because in the case of auras, aura polarities double the amount of mod points that the aura will give you instead of take away from you. So Energy Siphon has a boost of 7, but if you put it in a matching aura polarity, it will give you a boost of 14, which is really good when you're starting out. Obviously, you won't be that interested in which aura you slot at the start, but this might be something that you want to consider for later, when you will have to either deal with the cost of mods you will be slotting going up and not having enough mod energy to slot them, or with the fact that you will have to repolarize your aura to accommodate whichever aura you want to use. Loki is frail, obviously. He is also quite painful to play at the start. And I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. It takes a lot of skill and knowledge of the game to play Loki effectively. And that is not necessarily something a starter player comes equipped. Loki scales well, but he starts off rather poorly. And as a starter Warframe, I feel that he severely lacks the ability to make you just have fun with your time in Warframe. I've said that Switch Teleport can be fun, and Radial Disarm can be funny if used in the right circumstances, but they are not skills that will give you any special sort of satisfaction. And to start off, invisibility has a duration that is a bit too low to use that effect. All in all, Loki rightly earns his recommendation as an advanced Warframe. And I can't say that I would recommend him as your pick for starting Warframe, unless you can completely disregard if you haven't read too much into Warframe. Unless you know what you are getting into. Again, if you have any doubts, don't pick Loki as your starter Warframe, because you will want to throw yourself off a cliff in your first few dozen hours of playing Warframe. The other two Warframes are much more action-oriented. While Loki is good, he does not offer that, sadly. Next, we will be taking a look at Excalibur. Excalibur has middling health, shields, and low energy. He would be considered the well-rounded Warframe, and in fact he is difficult to class in a comparison with other systems. I suppose you could call him pretty much the ninja, but he's sort of a warrior more than a ninja. He doesn't have any stealth-oriented skills. He is about fighting, mostly. But all in all, his skills are satisfying to use and fun to some extent. Until not too long ago, I would have said that Excalibur is the no-brainer pick for Starter Warframe, because his first skill, Slash Dash, is possibly the most satisfying to use skill in the game. It's cheap, it does a reasonable amount of damage, it's flashy, cool, and satisfying, as I've said. You basically rush forward and damage every enemy in your path and a little bit along your path. If you can line up your enemies for Slash Dash, you can get some pretty cool moments. And I think that for a starter Warframe especially, that is very important, to get those cool moments, to get that satisfying skill use. And Slash Dash is undoubtedly the king of skills for that purpose. It will remain useful even later, but you will have to apply several castings of Slash Dash, which isn't frustrating and not especially costly either. Next, we have Radial Blind. Radial Blind is not a damage skill like Slash Dash, but it is a useful skill, more so than you might be led to believe. It stuns enemies for a short duration and blinds them for a short duration after. This can be used to help down teammates or just get a large bunch of enemies to stop shooting at a defensive objective, or to get a large bunch of enemies to just leave you alone because you don't have enough energy to Slash Dash them into oblivion or use his ultimate. It's a skill that you should use once in a while and look into. If you like it, or if you don't like it, it's up to you, but I would recommend using it. It's good in a lot of situations. And if you don't really want those mod points for something else, I think it's worth it. Even to start and even scaling it. Next we have Super Jump. Super Jump is Excalibur's most useless skill, but it has some fun applications. You can jump on various elevated platforms, and it does generally enhance your mobility for very little cost. It is a skill that can be safely ignored, but if you find yourself wanting to jump really high, it's a pretty fun skill to have. Elevation is a tactical advantage after all. Excalibur's last skill is Radial Javelin. Radial Javelin does damage to targets surrounding Excalibur up to a pretty high range. He has a limit on the number of targets, but when you're starting off, you probably won't be paying too close attention to that. The damage is questionable because it is divided among 3 different damage types. Other than that, this skill is a flashy way of getting rid of a good bunch of enemies. All in all, it will take a lot of energy, obviously, as an ultimate, especially since Excalibur doesn't have that much energy to begin with. The skill that makes or breaks your decision to pick Excalibur as your starter Warframe will be Slash Dash. Slash Dash is awesome, and if for some reason you don't think Slash Dash is awesome, you won't think Excalibur is awesome. But there's very, very little reason that you shouldn't think Slash Dash is awesome. Again, a little bit about the aura polarity. Excalibur has no aura polarity. None. Nothing. Which means, at the same time that he won't be getting bonus aura polarity points, and that he is free to fit any aura that you want without getting any less than 7 bonus aura polarity points. This is both a blessing and a curse, but it can be more of a blessing for a starter Warframe because you're free to experiment with all the auras in the game. Personally, I wouldn't recommend experimenting with too many auras, as Energy Siphon, as I've said, is the easiest to justify aura. But you might have some fancy ideas or come up with some interesting combos if you experiment with some auras. And Excalibur, because he has no aura polarity, is a good choice for that sort of endeavor. But I like it. Excalibur is a good choice for a starter Warframe for pretty much anybody. His skills are flashy and destructive, but he also comes with a little bit of mobility and a little bit of crowd control. While his power is a sore spot, his maximum power is a sore spot, he can cast Slash Dash a good amount of times because of how cheap it is. And as I've said before, Slash Dash is going to be the reason why you pick Excalibur as your starter Warframe, or the reason why you don't pick Excalibur as your starter Warframe. Frankly, I think that the satisfaction and the cool factor of that one skill and of Radial Javelin as well will more than justify Excalibur as a solid starter pick. Regarding speed, both Excalibur and Mag are have middling speed, so there's not much to talk about in that regard. Next we have, every button except the one I should be clicking. Next we have Mag. Mag is sadly also not very easy to define. Mag would be the caster option for starter Warframes, but the way her stats are set up, this can be quickly put under question. Her health is on the low side, her shields are pretty beefy, her energy is also on the low side, which is a big sore spot for this Warframe. Why make a caster Warframe with such low energy? Well, her shields kind of justify that. Her shields are, as I've said, pretty beefy and will serve you well both at low levels and at middling levels. I wouldn't say they scale very well at high levels, but if you put some mods on her, if you get some mods and put some mods on her to scale them up, then they will serve you well for your entire career. Now on to her skills. Her first skill is pull. Pull, as the skill says, pulls enemies closer to Mag in a large area in front of her and a little bit around. It also does damage while pulling these enemies. Starting off, pull will be an awesome skill to use for damage because it's cheap. It has a area of effect that is much more predictable than Excalibur's slash dash, but because of the lack of rangefinder on pull, you will have to learn yourself what distance pull is effective at. If you try to pull something that is beyond pull's maximum range of effect, obviously you won't be damaging those enemies or having any effect on them. So you need to put some practice into that. But once you've achieved that, pull is a great skill to use for damage and crowd control. Starting at sort of middle levels of enemies, pull will not be that awesome for damage because compared to slash dash, for example, pull does a lot less damage. It does slightly more than half the damage of a slash dash, which is unfortunate, but Mag used to be a lot worse back in the day, and she has been changed. One of the changes to her abilities came onto pull, and with more damage, pull could be considered to be easily overpowered. So while pull scales off at middle levels, it is still very effective as a crowd control method, even at high levels. Also, if you invest power strength, pull will remain useful for long. And of course, since the area is so large and predictable, you can always recast it. And because it's so cheap, you can end up doing more damage with pull than with Mag's ultimate. Next on Mag's ability list, we have Shield Polarize. Shield Polarize is a skill that you might not like to begin with. Shield Polarize is a skill that is completely useless in 2 cases out of 3, namely those cases being with the factions that you will be going against. The Grineer and the Infested have no shields. Now, Shield Polarize restores the shields of you and your teammates within a certain area, and explodes the shields of your enemies within that area. Only corpus have shields. So, as an offensive weapon, it is only useful against corpus. The corpus being the boxy looking dudes with the robots, of course. Against other factions, you will only have the component of shield polarize restoring your shields. And for the cost, I wouldn't say it's worth it. The only situation in which it would be worth it just as a shield restore would be if you know that both you and your teammates have high shields. So you will need to have had equipped a shield enhancing mod and know that your teammates have shield enhancing mods. Another thing that hampers your use of this skill as restorative is that the friend health tab that you can pull up with the Z key is not that great for telling how many shields your friends have. It has health bars. It doesn't have shield bars. So you will have to train if you want to be a shield healer. And I don't recommend that you really get too much into it. Also, the damage component can be very hit or miss. As I've said, it's only useful against corpus. And against corpus, it deals damage. It deals damage equal to a percentage of your enemy's shield points. So it is roughly as effective against any level of enemy, which you might think is a good thing. But unless you boost it, unless you boost power strength, the amount of damage that it does can have unpredictable effects. It easily clears the trash, the regular crewman. It can heavily damage robots. It will probably destroy corpus flyers, and it will probably just piss off elite corpus. The explosions that shield polarize creates from the enemy shields that it depletes sadly do not stack, as, for example, molecular prime might stack for Nova. This is not necessarily a huge issue if you use power strength. But until you get there, this skill will be something you can love or hate within the same mission. Next on Mag's skill list we have Bullet Attractor. Bullet Attractor is a skill that I will have to struggle to present objectively. It costs a lot to cast. It has very few uses. Bullet Attractor creates a bubble around one enemy and redirects all fire that hits that bubble to that one enemy. You might think it's great, but it costs a lot, as I've said, so it's not worth it at all to use against regular enemies. It also amplifies the amount of damage that that enemy takes. And if you kill that enemy, it makes it explode. Why is that not awesome? The cost, again, is too high. Against normal enemies, there's pretty much no point of having that cover ignoring functionality. Even against elite enemies, you can't justify that much energy instead of using others of her skills, like pull or her ultimate, which affect not only that one enemy but all the enemies around you or the area of pull. But it explodes, you might say. Well, some enemies have the unfortunate habit of being flung by the last kill, the last hit that kills them, which may end up flinging them a good distance away from their friends, and the explosion that results after the enemy is killed is not that big. It's also not that damaging. In fact, for the cost of bullet attractor, you could cast pull 3 times and deal 3 times as much damage. Well, you might say it's useful against bosses. Problem is that a lot of bosses these days are locked into certain stages, and during these stages you either have to hit a weak spot, which bullet attractor is not that great for because it redirects bullets from whichever point in the bubble you hit to the nearest point on the enemy. It also doesn't have that good a duration, so if you have a boss that shields up between stages, you're gonna have to cast this several times. Arguably, if you learn the tricks of the bosses, you can come to use it on bosses, because it does amplify damage, because it does make it easier to hit the boss. But it's very hard to justify for me. At the start, at middle levels, at high levels, at any level. Next on her list we have Crush. Crush is the most satisfying skill to use in Mag's repertoire. Crush pretty much takes every enemy in a radius around you. This radius is respectable, and it's good to boost that radius with whatever mod you can get your hands on. And it lifts those enemies, and then it crushes them into tiny, little, very painful looking balls, dealing a lot of damage. As I've said, it's very satisfying to use. But because Mag has such little energy to begin with, and Crush is an ultimate, you might not come to use it as often as you'd like. This is one reason why I can't just recommend Mag as the best starter Warframe, because she has such little energy. You will obviously want to look into optimizing her efficiency, getting more energy for her, and so on. But to start, her small energy pool will be very painful. If you use pull a lot, and there's no reason not to at the early levels, you might not hurt that much for energy. But when you have to start using Crush, you are going to feel that little problem in Mag's stat line. And it's unfortunate because since Mag is the caster of the starter lineup, she should be introducing you to what it feels like to cast a lot of skills, obviously. But you will have to put in some serious work to get her. Now, about her aura. Her aura has a polarity, an aggressive polarity, an attack polarity. The V polarity is home to rifle amp, which isn't a caster aura. That is very unfortunate because it only contributes to the fact that she is lacking energy. You can slot rifle amp if you want. It boosts the damage of your main weapon, turning her into a sort of unfortunate hybrid. If you would want to slot energy siphon, you'll get a lot less bonus mod points for it. So this particular aura is sadly hindering mag both at early levels and whatever levels you might get to with her. It, as I've said, contributes to her energy being a very, very sore spot in her starter lineup of stats. All in all, mag can be satisfying to use at early levels. She is more effective against Corpus. And as I've said again and again, and I feel the need to say it again, she really suffers for maximum power. If you think you can get over the fact that she suffers in that area, she is a good choice. You can use Pool very effectively. Crush is very satisfying to use against enemies. And Shield Polarize, with a bit of work, can be very interesting and very effective to use. But I would say that mag, all in all, is a frame that you would want to pick only if you have some knowledge of the game and if you have some patience, because her skills use energy and okay, I'm not going to say it again, but you get the point, okay? Why didn't I stress this on Excalibur, which is a frame that has exactly the same amount of energy? I didn't stress it on Excalibur because I stressed Slash Dash instead. And as I've said, Slash Dash deals almost twice as much damage as Pull, even though it's a bit harder to hit with. And for that reason, Excalibur ends up being more energy efficient than mag. Which one of the three Warframes would I recommend to a starter player? You are going to have to pick one, obviously. You can hunt the others if you want, but that will be later, and you will have to live with your choice for quite a long time until you can get your first new Warframe building. Excalibur is probably the easiest Warframe in these three to recommend to a starter player. He is satisfying to use, fairly healthy, and he is pretty much the poster boy of Warframe in the literal sense and figurative sense. Mag comes in second. You can give her a shot if you want a caster Warframe, but as I've said, only pick mag if you are patient with your energy pool. I've said it again. And if you have read a little bit about the game so that you know when to use shield polarize, when not to use bullet attractor, and when you have to use crush and spend a lot of that energy, which you hold so dear and so precious because it's so little. In third place is Loki. As you can see, I am currently using Loki, and he is good at high levels. But speaking from vast personal experience, playing Loki, you need to know what you're getting into. And as a starter player, you probably don't. It's not an insult. You shouldn't take this the wrong way, but you probably don't. And if you don't, you shouldn't chance playing Loki, because he doesn't give that satisfying crush, doesn't give that satisfying sense of killing lots of enemies quickly and being a badass. Loki is only good if you know how to use him, if you have the mods to use him, and if you have the weapons to complement his skills, which are not damage focused. Okay, this has been it for part 1 of my Warframes Primer. Please be on the lookout for part 2 coming soon. If you've enjoyed this video or found it informative, please remember to subscribe for more. If you want to look up the numerical stats of these Warframes, you can obviously do so on the wiki. I chose not to get too much into them because I wanted to give you something extra compared to the wiki. And now I'm gonna go because I need to play some Warframe. This has been Rexer from the YouTube channel NotQuiteThereGaming, signing off.